and it'll be a nice little review, which going over the opinion of the Shulchan Aruch, who was more lenient than the Ramah. The Shach discusses the opinion of Shulchan Aruch, who mentioned permitted eating a par of food cooked in a meat pot together with dairy. Remember, the Ramah said we shouldn't do it l'chatchila, but the Shulchan Aruch, the Beis Yosef, permitted it. So if you cook noodles in a ben yomo meat pot, you could eat it with cheese. But the Shach cites a number of authorities who hold that even according to Shulchan Aruch, one may not cook it if you had an express intention of later eating it together with dairy. That means if you happened to have cooked it in a meat pot, you didn't plan to do that. So that's when the Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to eat it with dairy. But that you would not be allowed, if you had in mind, oh, I'm making macaroni and cheese, and I'm going to cook my noodles in a meat pot and mix it with cheese, that even the Shulchan Aruch would not allow. And it says the Shach, so that's a very important Shach, that the Shulchan Aruch who's lenient would not permit you to do it if that was your express kavanah. Now, the Shach, of course, is an Ashkenaz. And lived in Poland. So Sephardic poskim disagree as to whether to accept the Shach's interpretation of the Shulchan Aruch as the practical halacha. So according to the Yalkut Yosef, right, that's the Ovadia Yosef side of the psak, the Shach's opinion is not accepted by many Achronim. And one may cook par food in a meat pot even with the intention of eating it a dairy meat. So you don't have to have this lack of kavanah. Even if you had kavanah to do it, according to the Yalkut Yosef, the Beis Yosef permitted it. Says the Yalkut Yosef, "Lachein mutar lechatchila la'afot pot bechli shel basar ben yomo al dat lechol ha'pat imakol chalav." You could bake bake some bread in a ben yomo basar kli, even if you're going to eat it with cheese. Or the tagin beitz of a machbas psari, you fry an egg in a fleshik pan, even though it's ben yomo, right? It's within 24 hours. B'shemen chadash, almanat lechol achar kach et ha'beitzam gvina. Ve'en b'zeh eser klal. That's for the Sephardim, right? That's not us. We already said we are machmir, but for this is about Sephardim, they're lenient. But many Sephardic poskim, such as the Ben Ish Chai, the Kaf HaChaim, Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, rules like the Shach, that you may not use this not bar not lechatchila. The gam l'didan dazlina basar moran, we Sephardim who follow normally Shulchan Aruch, eino mutar levasar lechatchila k'derech shel basar bas yoma dai v'dachi k'dei lachlam b'chala. Ela rakin is vashel b'diavad. It's only if you happen to cook in a meat pot and you didn't really think about it. Oh, then all of a sudden you realize, oh, I cooked it in the meat pot. Do I have to throw these noodles away? No. B'diavad, I can eat it with cheese, according to, but mutar lachlam b'chala b'diavad. But l'chatchila, to have an intent to cook the noodles to eat with cheese, that even according to the Sephardim, they would not allow. Okay. So, by the way, gentlemen, up until now, we've been dealing with cooking the par of food in a ben yomo pot, right? Ben yomo is that you cook meat within 24 hours, and that would transfer blia, transfer flavor, lechora, if it wasn't for the not bar nat. Well, what about, right? Because remember, not bar nat means a second degree transfer. First, there was a transfer originally when the pot became fleshik. Then there's transfer into the noodles. That's a second. That weakened the blia, which we said that's why you could eat it with dairy. What about if the pot was Eino Ben Yomo, beyond 24 hours, where we have this principle that it's Noisen Tam Liv Gam, and in general, we're much more lenient when a pot is Eino Ben Yomo for most halachas. Is it the same about Nat Bar Nat? According to the Ramah. Let us discuss the opinion of the Ramah as accepted by Ashkenazim concerning one more important case. We explained that the Ramah does not allow eating a par of food cooked in a ben yomo meat pot together with dairy or vice versa. What is the halacha if the pot is not ben yomo? Might we be more lenient since the flavor imparted from the pot would not be as potent? The Ramah rules in this case that it is indeed permitted to eat the para food together with dairy. Meaning shlaya ben yomo. From the Ramah itself, it seemed that lechatchila you could cook noodles in a fleishik ein ben yomo pot and eat it with cheese. That's if we would read the Ramah, that's what it would seem like. However, it's unclear how to understand the Ramah's use of the notion of lechatchila. Does he mean that it's permitted to cook a par food in a non ben yomo meat pot with the intention of eating with dairy? Or does he only mean that if one already cooked it in the meat pot? It's after the fact. It's b'di'evet. You didn't plan on doing that. Oh, I made a mistake. I cooked it in the meat pot. You can eat it with dairy. But ideally, one should not have that intention with cooking it. Or maybe when the Ramah said lechatchila means you could lechatchila have that in mind. So the Ashkenazi Achronim, as usual, dispute this issue, with the Gra being lenient and the Chochmas Adam being stringent. Remember, the Chochmas Adam is the Chaya Yodim, Rav Danzig. Says the Chochmas Adam, Im haya klish nizbashel bo eno ben yomo, mutter la'achlo b'chalav, afilu didan, aval also lechatchila levashel b'klish eno ben yomo k'nei l'achlo. The Chochmas Adam says very clear, you're not allowed to do it lechatchila. Oh, I'm going to have my macaroni and cheese and I'm going to use the eno ben yomo meat pot. Not allowed to do it. The noisen tam livgam asur lechatchila. V'nira li im ein kli acher lechamim bo yesh lisboch lahatir lolish bahem afil lechatchila keven the itatarti noisen tam livgam noisen tapar noisen tam. So he says if you have no other choice, you look around, you have no other pot except this eno ben yomo meat pot. He says in a shasat chak, because you're relying on the not bar not leniency and the fact that it's noisen tam livgam, so he permits it even lechatchila. Says the Gra there in Yoredeya, the Bir Agra, Af b'kedera ein osur lechatchila she'ena ben yom ela mishum gzeira atu ben yomo ma she'en ken kan. Remember we learned that let's say I cook milk directly in an eno ben yomo pot, you're allowed to eat the food. We just said we make a gzeira, we should toivel that kli, because of maybe otherwise you will forget about doing that for a ben yomo. But the food is mutter, says the Gra. So masha enken kanda af ben yomo mutter medina kinisker le'el. That means mikra din, even a ben yomo not bar not is permitted. It's just the Ramah said we should be more stringent. So the Gra clearly is lenient regarding not bar not in an eno ben yomo pot. So to summarize, according to Chochmas Adam, cooking par food in a non ben yomo pot in order to eat it with dairy is considered like actively creating a case of noisen tam livgam, causing an impotent taste to be transferred to another food in an improper manner. Although the flavor does not forbid the food, one may nevertheless not do so initially. But he does allow using such a utensil when there are no others available, because the utensil is not ben yomo, therefore it's noisen tam livgam, and it's a case of permitted not bar not. Right? There's no real mixing of meat and dairy at any stage. Thus, he would agree that if one only has one such utensil, such as an urn or food processor that is meat, but is not ben yomo, or other such utensils are not available, it would be permitted to use it and still consume the par food inside with dairy. It's a big hector here by the Chochmas Adam. If you only have, let's say, one food processor, it happens to be meat, but you haven't used it for 2 days, for 24 hours. So you could use it, lechatchila, because you have no other such implement, and use it with dairy, lechatchila. Big leniency, which Ashkenazim follow. Sefer Kashas rules that Ashkenazim should follow the opinion of Chochmas Adam, and may be lenient only when there's no other similar dairy utensil available for use. So that means, in our normal day life, we should not use our eno ben yomo meat pot to cook noodles, l'chatchila, if I know I'm going to eat it with cheese. If it so happens that your wife tells you, by accident, I cooked these noodles in a meat pot, you could paskin that you're allowed to eat it with cheese b'diavad. Okay. What about using a dairy spoon in a par of food which is cooking in a meat pot? Meaning, up and now we've talked about putting noodles in a meat pot, which we said is a not bar not, and the Shulchan Aruch allowed you to eat it with dairy. But remember, while it's cooking, could you stick a dairy spoon into those noodles? Because think about it. The blia, yes, it's a not bar not blia going into the meat blia is going into the noodle. Now you're sticking a dairy spoon in there. Is that going to create a problem? So we will conclude this section on not bar not with the following question. What is the halacha if one mistakenly used a ben yomo dairy spoon? So we're talking about a milk spoon that you used that day. So it's ben yomo. To stir a par of food noodles, cooking in a ben yomo meat pot. On one hand, perhaps this is also considered a case of permitted not bar not, since there's no flavor of meat that ever directly comes in contact with dairy, since the food is parve and the spoon and pot are merely utensils. On the other hand, the flavor of the meat emitted from the pot does come in contact with the flavor emitted from the dairy spoon, albeit it's a weakened flavor. It's a not bar not flavor. Let's just remind ourselves, if you were cooking a cholent in a meat pot, ben yomo, it's on the fire, and you put a dairy spoon in there, so you got basar b'chalav everywhere, in the food, in the spoon, in the utensil. So we're not talking about that. We're talking about cooking a par of food in a ben yomo pot, which we said, according to Shulchan Aruch, you can eat with dairy. So, but here we're sticking the milchik spoon into the noodles while it's cooking. Rishonim dispute the halacha in a similar case, where meat.
Ernie, the milchik spoon you're talking about, a milchik spoon that's a ben yomo.
Correct, absolutely.
Not a ben yomo wouldn't be a problem.
If it's, let's wait. But right now we're asking the question about ben yomo. If ben yomo is permitted, then certainly any ben yomo is going to be permitted. So we got to take it step by step.
But clearly putting a milchik spoon in the cholent in the hot spot.
Of course.
Okay.
That I just wanted to get everyone back to where we came from. That creates basar b'chalav. The blia and the meat in a ben yomo spoon is milk flavor. It's remember tam ke'ikr. That's why we started this shiur with the concept that the flavor is like you have a piece of cheese there, no different. So that creates basar b'chalav. The spoon is now a mixture of basar b'chalav, needs hagala. The food has to be thrown away, and the pot has to have hagala, no question. But now we're talking about a parve food in the meat pot, where we have this leniency of not bar not. It's not a direct meat flavor going into a meat cholent. It's noodles. So remember, you have a second degree not bar not. The first knot was into the meat kli, which made it a meat kli. 12 hours ago. That's the first knot. Then the second knot is when it goes into the food. And then remember we made a distinction. And if you boil it, that's even a bigger leniency because there's 3 knots. It goes from the first knot from the kli into the water, which is the second knot, into the food, which is the third knot. That l'chulei alma is permitted to eat with dairy. But remember, we talked about if it was directly in the meat pot, you don't have that. So the Shulchan Aruch says you're allowed to eat it lechatchila with cheese, and the Ramah was more stringent. So what happens to this spoon? Rishonim dispute the halacha in a similar case, where meatballs were washed in a dairy basin with hot water. Right? Think about a big tub, like a washing basin, which is dairy, and you have hot water in there, and you're washing a meat bowl in there, like when we wash dishes. So Tosfos holds that in this case, the transfer of taste of both utensils into the water is problematic. while the Ramban posits that the food and utensils remain permitted. The question ultimately becomes a dispute of halacha as well between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. Says the Shulchan Aruch in Yoredeya, Tzadik Hey, Siman Gimel. Up until now, we've been doing Siman Aleph and Beis. All of this is in Tzadik Hey. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Ka'aru shel basar, you have meat pots, shehutchu, that are being washed, in a cauldron, in a dairy cauldron, b'chamin, in hot water, shayad soletis b'hen. We know why that's important. When you have yad soletis b'hen heat, that causes transfer of blia. So afilu shneim b'nei yoman. So even if the milchtik cauldron was a ben yomo, it was within 24 hours milk, and the meat pot that you use is also ben yomo mutter. There's no problem. There's no isser here. It's a meat flavor or milk flavor. So that's a heter flavor. Remember we said there's a big difference if something had absorbed chazer. There is no leniency of not barnat. That's the Ran of last week. Go over that if you need to remember, because that's important. But here, these are blias of heter. A milk blia, it's only when milk and meat come together that it's isser. But individually, milk and meat are a heter blia. So this is a not bar not, right? It's going into, there was one knot into the vessel that made it a milichic vessel, then another knot that goes into the water, so it's not bar not. We have to make sure that there's no physical food remaining in any of these dishes. It's got to be completely clean. Because in Hayashum and Davuk Behen, so in order to permit, you would need 60 times water in that vessel to nullify the little bit of shuman. So if it was a big piece of fat, you might not have 60 against it, then you'd have a problem. So, but otherwise, if these are clean dishes, and basically there's an analogy to our case of the milk spoon going into the noodles being cooked in a meat pot. If the Shulchan Aruch is going to be lenient here, he's certainly going to be lenient by the milk spoon. Says the Ramah, Yesh oisrim, afilu ein shuman dovuk behen. Some will prohibit, in this case, elim kein echad ben hakelim einu bnei yoman miblias kli rishon. Unless one of the kelim are not a ben yomo. Az kol hakelim mutari. So this goes your question, Chaim. If it's an einu ben yomo spoon, everything would be permitted. Like in this case, if one of these vessels was einu ben yomo, then no problem. Avalim shneim bnei yoman. V'yidichosam biyachad b'kli rishon, and you washed it in a kli rishon, yad soletis ba'kol asurachi, noagin ve'in l'shanois. That's our Ashkenazi halacha, according to Ramah. So we would not permit a ben yomo milk spoon to be stuck in noodles being cooked in a meat pot. According to Shulchan Aruch, when they wash clean meat dishes inside a dairy basin, even if both are ben yomo, as the case is one are permitted, not bar not, while the Ramah holds that this is forbidden and the utensils also become treif. The Taz writes that the same dispute applies to using the dairy spoon inside a meat pot with para food, which was the question we asked. Right? Says the Taz, in Nizbashal Mayim or Yerokos, if you're cooking water or vegetables in a pot, in a choleves bas yomo, right? It's a dairy pot of within 24 hours of being cooked dairy in it, and you're cooking water or vegetables. The tochvu bo kaf shel basar, and you stuck into the water or the vegetables a fleshik spoon ben yomo, the ein samech neged kaf bas yomo, and there isn't enough water or vegetables 60 times the amount of blia that went into that spoon. Oisrim zed zeh, ilu shneim mikunochos, if they're clean, yofe, vav shezeh mamish din ka'aro shehutchu b'yoyre, shezok ha'shulchan aruch mikol mokum kosavti zeh shumotzi b'yoyser. This is much more common than washing the dishes, and he says it would be the same machlokas between the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah. We paskin like the Ramah. So page 160 has a nice summary. Par of food, like noodles cooked in a ben yomo meat dish. According to Shulchan Aruch, you can eat it directly with dairy. According to Ramah, we may not eat it with dairy lechatchila. let's just remember, the Shach explains that the case of lechatchila is where one can avoid eating it together with dairy, which one should do. The b'diavad case is where it was already mixed with dairy, in which case one may nevertheless eat the food. That means, and it's not even behefsid, that means if your wife or whoever cooked the noodles in a meat pot, ben yomo, and mixed it with cheese, and served it to you, and then you find out you're allowed to eat it. Lechatchila, you should not mix it with the cheese. But that's the b'diavad case that we're permitted. You're not allowed to do it. Lechatchila, but if it was happened, that b'diavad is permitted. But may not eat with dairy lechatchila. If you cook parv in a meat dish with intent to eat it with dairy, so of course the Shulchan Aruch permitted it, and that's how the Yalkut Yosef paskins. But there were the Shach and the Ben Ish Chai, even for the Sephardim, forbid it. And of course, if we're not allowed to do that, Ashkenaz. Now, if we're cooking parv in a non-ben yomu meat dish with intent to eat with dairy, so again, the Shulchan Aruch permits that. That means the Shulchan Aruch says we are allowed to take one of our fleshik pots that we haven't used for a day, and you can cook lechatchila noodles that you intend to eat with cheese. The Chochmas Adam forbids us to do it lechatchila, but the Gra, even for Ashkenazim, permits you to do that. We are noeg like the Chochmas Adam, not to do it lechatchila. Again, the Yevid, it's permitted. And then this last case of the dairy spoon in a meat pot, right? You're cooking noodles in a meat pot. Both are ben yomo, and you put the dairy spoon in it. So the Shulchan Aruch permits it. The Ramah says everything is forbidden. If both utensils ben yomo, of course, if there ain't no ben yomo, it would be permitted. Okay. Any questions before we move on to Dover Charif? Okay. So page 161, Dover Charif. Another important dimensions in kashrus involves the concept known as Dover Charif, foods with a strong or sharp taste. Examples of food generally included in this category. By the way, there's a huge machlokas in the sugya here. What is considered a Dover Charif? It's huge. They're giving us the accepted consensus. So garlic, onions, radishes, spicy peppers, pickles. Now, just quickly, the Aruch HaShulchan holds that pickles do not constitute a Dover Charif. And therefore, most poskim are sometimes lenient with regard to pickles in case of need. Like if you're cutting, we'll see. If you cut and use a knife to cut pickles, so you see they're lenient about pickles if there's a problem. But regarding garlic, onions, radishes, spicy peppers, pickled olives, and lemons, that's considered a Dover Charif. As we will see,
if it's pickled, it's considered charif. If it's pickled, if it's in like anything sour, like a vinegar or something like that, that makes it charif already. It doesn't have to be spicy.
No. But the Aruch HaShulchan Sydney argues, and it says pickles are not the typical Dover Charif that we have to be concerned about, and that's why the poskim who deal with kashrus say that if you use the knife and you cut pickles, you might be able to be lenient because there's a machlokas regarding pickles. We're talking about our pickles in brine, even in brine and that kind of
even
stuff.
Israeli pickles are a little spicy.
Okay, so again we'd have to decide, but pickles are an exception, where l'chora there's some you can be lenient, a little bit more lenient regarding pickles, as we will see. Mm-hmm. So a number of the kashrus principles that we have learned so far, such as the more lenient status of a non-ben yomo utensil, not barnat, and that taste transfers applies only with heat, may not apply. So let's review. We said that normally a non-ben yomo pot, if the pot is beyond 24 hours and you cook, if you have a milchtik, if you have a fleshik pot, and you haven't used the pot for 3 days, technically it's 24 hours. We're just giving an example. And you cook macaroni and cheese in it, you can eat it. You can't do it l'chatchila. But if by accident you did it, it doesn't trace the food. And we said, as a gzeira, you must kasher the kli. But that's not maker adin. That's just because it's a gzeira atu the ben yomo kli. So that's one leniency about ein ben yom. they're talking about the not bar not, which we've just finished extensively. Eino ben yomo, there's not bar not is even more legal. Now, we've also up until now learned that a blia will transfer with heat. That if you have a meat pot and you pour cold milk in it, so the milk does not become treif. You just pour it out and you clean the pot out well, okay? Or let's say, because there's no blia without, now, if you let the milk sit there for 24 hours, kavush, it will be transferred. But just general, if you take a piece of cold cheese and place it on a cold plate of meat, a cold meat plate, they're both ben yomos, they don't answer one or another. Now, if the plate was hot, there's transfer. That's what we've been learning up until now, that in order to trace something up, you need heat to transfer the blia. We're going to see that when it comes to a davar charif,
what is the amount of the heat that requires? For example,
yad soledespo. Yad soledespo.
If I have a knife and the knife is milchik and I picked up a piece of schnitzel and the schnitzel is hot, so it would treif only if it's yad soledet.
No. So hang on. This is why I'm going over this again. We're going to see that by a davar charif, and then we'll see by a knife, these rules about heat doesn't apply. That there will be transfer even without heat.
Because of tuchka de sakina. Yeah.
Exactly. So we'll see that these things that we said that taste transfers applies only with heat may not apply in the case of number one, davar charif. That means it may happen even without heat, and we'll see about the concept of a knife. So ein chanam, and that's what we're going to learn. But I wanted to review what our basic halacha is regarding when it does transfer. Right now we've been learning it transfers with heat, whether it's cooking with water or whether it's sli, roasting. Now we'll see how much it transfers is different. We're not going to go into that. We'll see sometimes it transfers kedei klipa. Sometimes it transfers kedei natila. That means you have to just remove where they touched. Sometimes you have to remove 1 centimeter in. Sometimes it's kula. If it's a very fatty piece and you roasted the milk with it, the whole thing becomes usher. So, but in general, the isser only occurs when there's heat. But there's no heat, there's no transfer at all. Now, we'll see by a davar charif and by a knife how that works differently. The source of the unique status of this category can be found in Chulin, in Kuf Yud Aleph, which states that a davar charif absorbs and transfers flavor merely by cutting it with a knife, even though the food and the knife are both cold. This stands in contrast to most other foods, which absorb flavor only through cooking or similar methods. Let's see the sugya. Omar Chizkiya mishum Abaya, Hilchasa, Snon is a radish. Shechatchu b'sakin, shechatach b'basar. You have a knife that had been used to cut meat. Asr la'ochlo b'kutach. You may not eat the radish with mayonnaise, which was made with milk, because the meat flavor in the knife transferred to the radish. Hani militznon the agav churfei bola. This applies to its snow, not to a piece of bread, or not to another item, not to a piece of meat if it was milachik. It's because its known as radish. The agav churfei bola. So we explained in the previous section of the shir that it's permitted to eat a par of food cooked in a meat pot together with dairy. Remember, lechatchila, according to Shulchan Aruch, according to Rama, only b'di'eved, where it was already mixed with dairy. According to Shulchan Aruch, lechatchila, if it has not yet been mixed with dairy, since the taste is absorbed by the par of food from the pot alone, right? It's the nat bar nat. It didn't get it from meat; it got it from the pot, and is considered a case of nat bar nat. Nevertheless, in the case of a davar charif that is cut by a meat knife, the flavor of meat is considered to have been transferred to the food directly, and it is not treated as a regular case of nat bar nat. Let's think about it. This meat knife, how did it become a meat knife? we cut a piece of meat once with it. So that's the first knot of the meat into the knife. Now when we cut the radish, technically it's not going into a different food, not bar nat. But we're not invoking not bar nat because it's a davar charif. Because it's a davar charif, it's only in that case that it'll be boleh. Says Rashi, Hilkach, dogim sha'alu b'ka'ara, which we had last week. You had fish that was cooked. It's a part of food was placed on a meat. Ka'ara, but it's hot. Mutar la'ochlon b'kutaf. You would be allowed to eat it with fish. Kidamar de'enos and tam abam and amamish. If there was a flavor, a tam in the meat dish, and then there was a second transfer of that flavor into the fish that's not bar nat, so it's weakened. So you can eat that fish directly with cheese. This regular plates are clean. We're not talking about that there's be'en, some kind of food there. It's only a tam absorbed in the plate. So that's, says Rashi's bevorning us, is just a regular kli. Abalasakin pamim shashamnunis korish alav. He says that with a knife, fat sort of gets ingrained in the knife. The eno nicker, and you can't even see it to clean it. This is not nois and tam ki'ikr. We're using flavor. He says we worry about shamnunis on a knife. Shamnunis is mamish meat. That's number one, says Rashi. The od dimishum churfa bolatfei midogim aroit. That when you use the knife to cut the tznon is a spicy thing, and this will absorb more than fish, even though the fish are hot. And agav duch the sakina, because of the pressure of the knife, polet sakina ubolet snow. So Rashi here gave us two svaras into why this works. Number one, because you have to worry about shamnunis, but even you're going to tell me you clean the knife with a microwave, some kind of high technology, that knife has no mamashus. You've got another svara of duchke de sakina going along with something spicy that combination transfers flavor. Rashi's first reason is that a knife is different than other utensils, since there's sometimes leftover residue on the knife that would cause transfer of flavor to the davar charif. Rashi's second reason is that regardless of whether the knife is clean or not, the pressure of cutting a davar charif with a sharp knife causes a transfer of flavor. I'm reading the footnote. Some poskim hold that the same applies to a fork as well, since the pressure created by a fork when used to handle food is also halachically significant. I don't know of that stringency. That's the first time I saw it. In general, we all accept this issue of the knife. The but practical halachic difference between
if the knife cuts a fresh meat, yeah. So,
is the meat hot? Is the meat hot?
No, the meat is cold.
Go ahead.
But there is
it's not a davar charif. It's not a davar charif. So it's not a. It will not be bolea because there's no heat.
Even if
it's only going to be the knife only is bolea here, is because there was a combination of the duchit, the sakina, and the sharpness of the tzno.
Mm-hmm.
So you need both. So if you take a knife and you cut a cold piece of meat, there won't be transfer. The duchit sakina alone is not enough.
Mm-hmm. So always the duchit sakina with the sharpness of the food.
Exactly. So that's why people have parv knives that they use to cut their vegetables, because it's among your vegetables you have onions, garlic. So that's going to create a problem. If you had a meat knife or a milk knife and you were cutting those vegetables, you would make all your vegetables either milchik or fleshik because of this rule right here. So by using a parv knife, you never create a problem. You can use your vegetables with either milk or dairy for the exact reason we just learned. And Nati asked the fantastic question. because we see the nafkamina that if you took a knife and you cut a cold piece of meat, the knife would just have to clean it off, and that's it. Just like I told, if you take a piece of meat, you put it on a plate. You put it on a milk plate. You didn't do anything. You got to wash the plate off, and you wash the meat off. You need hadacha of both, but both are kosher. There's no basar b'chala because there's no transfer. And we're going to see it requires more. That duchket the sakina alone is not enough. You need both. Like we just said, Rashi said both. He said duchket the sakina polit sakina ubolatzno. So the practical halachic difference between these two reasons of Rashi arises in a case when the knife was wiped clean and rinsed well from any residual food prior to being used for cutting a sharp food. According to Rashi's first reason, if you cleaned it, it would not be forbidden to eat the sharp food together with dairy since the knife is clean. While according to the second reason, it would be forbidden due to the pressure from the knife on the radish, and the radish would be fleshik since its sharpness elicits the meat flavor from the knife. The Shulchan Aruch rules the following as the practical halacha. Snono silka. Shechatcham b'sakin shel basar ben yomo o she'enim mekunach aser la'achlam b'chal. So you see, the Shulchan Aruch says or. He says he's worried about the first sheet of Rashi, right? Enim mekunach. So certainly that would make the radish milachik because you're transferring mamoshus of the meat into the radish. But he says even if it's completely clean, but it's ben yomo, it's aser la'achlam b'chala. So the duchket sakina with the sharpness of the food transferred the meat flavor from the knife into the radish even without heat. The Gra comments that by offering these two scenarios, the Shulchan Aruch appears to accept both explanations given by Rashi as conditions. As condition A corresponds to Rashi's second reason that the sharpness of the davar charif creates a taste transfer, and condition B corresponds to the first reason that we are concerned with the residue on the knife. Bir Gra, v'hu kishnei hatamim shel Rashi sham. Chanami, we see that it fulfills Rashi in Chulin over there. Based on this, it seems that if the knife is clean, cutting a davar charif with a meat knife will cause the food to have the status of meat, and the same for dairy if it was vice versa, which is how we have learned so far. So, and the Ramah certainly doesn't argue with the Shulchan Aruch. So that's our din. Now I was waiting for somebody to ask me, what about an Eino ben Yomo knife? We've been dealing now with a knife that you've used within 24 hours. We've seen that if it's Eino ben Yomo, we have nois and tam livgam, right? Beyond 24 hours, we see that it didn't ask, right? If we took macaroni and cheese and cooked it in a pot, in a fleshik pot that hadn't been used for 24 hours, you can eat the macaroni and cheese because it's nois and tam livgam. Mikar adin. There's no basar b'chala. Even though there's heat. But since it's beyond 24 hours, and we said it's livgam, it's like an impotent taste, and it doesn't transfer the basar b'chala. We said you have to do agala to the kli. That's a gzeira. Well, what about an Eino ben Yomo knife regarding the halacha we just learned? What is the halacha if one cuts a davar charif with a knife that is not ben Yomo? For example, what happens when one cuts an onion with a meat knife where it is unknown when it was last used? Which we learned that a stam kli we can treat as Eino ben Yomo. So this, if you don't know when the kli has been used last, remember we had a sfeik. So we always treat that as Nei ben Yomo kli. So if you have a knife, you don't know when it was last used, so it's an Eino ben Yomo, as we learned in the previous shir. So what is the halacha if one fried an omelet with onions in a meat frying pan that was not ben Yomo? So again, you have an omelet. Can you do the onions in these cases have the status of meat? So Rishonim dispute both of these questions based on a difference of opinion as to how to interpret the following sources. The Mishnah and Gemara and Avodah Zarah state that a chiltis, which is a type of herb, is forbidden when cut by an Eino ben Yomo knife of a Gentile, which is presumed to have absorbed non-kosher flavor at one point due to its sharp taste. Elu dvarim shelo tichachav masurim, vein asurim isra noah, the court shel chiltis. And says the Gemara, a court shel chiltis my timer. Why was this chiltis osir? Mishum the mefaskid lebesakina was cut with a knife of a goy. Avagav the omer mar noisan tam livgam mutter. Even though we said if you bought a knife from a Gentile, you can treat it as Eino ben Yomo. Like if you bought a pot from a goy, it's Eino ben Yomo, it's noisan tam livgam, whatever you cook in there is okay, because the tray flavor in there is also okay, because it's livgam. But because a knife was used, agav churfi de chiltis, because of the sharpness of this chiltis, mechal yeleshan nenusa v'avalei k'nois tam lishvach v'aser. So this is the sugi of mechal yelei lishvach. So we have to throw out all our ideas of Eino ben Yomo nois tam livgam. The concept here is that the Eino ben Yomo knife gets resuscitated. The noisen, if you cut something sharp, it resuscitates the flavor back to a good flavor. So even though we said a kli beyond 24 hours has a bad flavor, if you're using it with spicy food, the spicy food will resuscitate the flavor and make it ben yomo.
Anything that you cook with spices. So you have a problem here.
No, but hang on. Spices is not, we said it depends on the spot. Onion, we're talking about onion for a minute. That's a davar charif. Garlic.
No, but any tafshil that if you put spices there and it's a little bit spicy, you can say that it resuscitates it takes over the tam nifgam. So you have an issue.
So it's got to be a davar charif, nati. If you cook if a davar charif.
If you cook with pepper, is that charif?
No, it's not.
So the thing itself has to be davar charif. The tafshil itself.
Let's read what they say is considered consensus charif. Garlic, onions, radishes, spicy peppers, pickled olives, and lemons.
What about if
like
you
have a jalapeno pepper?
So what about if you have a tafshil that has 30% onions and then the 60?
So hang on. So let's take it step by step. So we have this concept now of, we had this great leniency of an Eino ben Yomo being a noisim tam livgam, but now we're learning that by a davar charif, with the sakin, remember, it's with the sakin cutting it, caused the mechayele sham nenusa, the fat that was in the knife was resuscitated, even though l'chora it was beyond the 24 hours. V'havalei k'noisim tam lishvach v'aser, and that which used to be livgam now becomes lishvach. It's mechayel lishvach, and therefore we have a problem. The Gemara indicates that a knife that is Eino ben Yomo will still cause flavor to be halachically transferred in the case of a davar charif. So when the knife is used with a davar charif, even though the knife is Eino ben Yomo, we have a problem. Because you might have said to me, well, why do we need a parve knife? Let's just use a knife that's Eino ben Yomo. No. The problem is, because even an Eino ben Yomo knife, if you cut a davar charif, it's going to be mechayel l'shvach, and it's going to transmit that meat flavor into the onion. And then you can't use the onion for the opposite thing. So that's the only problem is going to be when you cook with spices, you got to make sure you cook with the right utensil. So Rishonim dispute whether the ruling of the Gemara applies only to the case of chiltis or to any other case of davar charif as well. So we're not there yet to our davar charif. The Gemara talked about chiltis, which is a davar charif. So the Gemara wants to know, well, what about our davar charifs? Are they like chiltis or not? So the Beis Yosef,
we don't even know what chiltis is, do we?
Chiltis, we don't know. It was some herb, which had some kind of spice. So the Beis Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo, in the Beis Yosef commentary on the Tur, wrote, "Kosav b'sefer HaTruma, dafilu en asakin ben yomo aser." You have it's gonna transfer flavor. Dagav churfei snow or yeret, because of the sharpness of the radish. Mechalya v'havi lishvach, right? We use that language. It resuscitates the lifgam and makes it lishvach. Kidamrinan gabi korchel chiltis. So when the Tur uses, when the Beis Yosef uses, we know what he's talking about because we quoted the Gemara where the korchel chiltis comes from. where there it had nothing to do with basar b'chol. There it had to do with absorption of a treif flavor from a goy. But kosav maram, the dafka b'kort shel chiltis amrin the churfei mashvilei l'shvach. V'lo b'shum davar acher charif klal. So the maram says it's only chiltis, but not a regular davar charif. V'chein Rabbeinu Yechiel bar b'gdolim shavim lahatir. So the Shulchan Aruch cites both opinions concerning an Eino ben Yomo knife in discussing the status of a regular davar charif, not chiltis. Our davar charif, onion, radish, garlic. Though he cites the more lenient opinion as the standard one and the more stringent one as some say. So this is something we haven't come in contact with yet, but I want to discuss it. The Shulchan Aruch himself many times will begin a halacha, then he will say the yesh omri. That's the concept of stam the yesh omri. Halacha kestam. Because the Shulchan Aruch oftentimes would give a different opinion than yesh omrim. Usually in the Shulchan Aruch we paskin like the stam, like the initial part of the Shulchan Aruch. So what does he say in the initial? Tsnono silka, radishes or beets, shechatcham besakin shel basar ben yomo. You cut a radish with a ben yomo meat knife, o she'enu mekunach, or the meat knife was not clean. Asur la'achlam b'chalav, ad she'yito mimokam achatach kedei netilas mokom. So it's all, we'll see. If you cut a big piece of onion, you just have to remove where the knife cut the onion, so that meat went into the onion a little bit. So you just have to remove the mokam chaticha. You can remove the rest of the onion. Did everyone catch that? That's very important. It doesn't aser kulo. It asers just the mokam. Like we'll see, it's kedei klipa, kedei netila. We'll see what it is, but you have to remove the place where it touched. The yesh omrim dehu adin leinu ben yomo v'hu mekunach. So he's bringing the Sefer HaTruma, right? That the Beis Yosef quoted when he commented on the tour, who aser and even eino ben yomo. But in the stam halacha, the Shulchan Aruch brought lahatir eino ben yomo. He only aser ben yomo. So whenever the Shulchan Aruch presents one opinion as the standard, and then cites the opposing opinion, as some say, it is often assumed that the halacha follows the first opinion. If so, then a davar charif cut by an eino ben yomo meat or dairy knife would remain parav. That means the food would remain parav, except if you were cutting a chiltis. This is in fact the ruling of the Shulchan Aruch in the continuation of the siman with regard to crushing spices, which are also considered a davar charif, where he only discusses a ben yomo utensil as creating an issue, and does not cite the second opinion that a non-ben yomo utensil would have the same status. He says, Tavlin shenidochu medochu shel basar. Here comes the most important two words, ben yomo, asur la'achlam b'chol. So we see clearly that the Shulchan Aruch for the Sfardim are lenient regarding an eino ben yomo knife cutting a davar charif. Only asers a ben yomo knife. Eino ben yomo knife, it doesn't hold of this concept of machaya l'shvach. However, us Ashkenazim, the Ramah appears to disagree in the case of the spices, and it is assumed that his comments apply to halacha quoted above with the radish and the beet, because the Ramah doesn't say anything up there. In Yoredei at Tzadik Vav Amud Aleph, the Ramah is silent. The Ramah only wakes up by Tzadik Vav when it talks about spices. Yeshon Rafilu Eino Ben Yomo. So the Ramah sticks in there that the Ben Yomo will Eino Ben Yomo will aser as well. So based on that ruling of the Ramah, it seems clear that the practical halach for Ashkenazim should be that in the case of a davar charif cut by an eino ben yomo knife or cooked in an eino ben yomo pot, it means you fry up onions in a meat pot, even though the ben yomo, even though the pot hadn't been used for 3 days, but it's onions. So it's not just a knife. There's transfer, but normally an eino ben yomo would not transfer, it would be livgam, but because it's a davar charif, it has the status of that becomes dairy. Or excuse me, if it was a meat frying pan, the onions would be meat, and you wouldn't be able to eat them with some kind of milk food, even though it was eino ben yomo. Which normally, remember we said in eino ben yomo, if you cook macaroni and cheese in an eino ben yomo pot, you can eat it. There's no transfer. Here, there would be a problem. There would be a transfer because it's a davar charif.
But if the majority of the tavshil is not davar charif, and the mute is davar charif,
Well, so if you would need shishim against whatever you do, you wouldn't have shishim. You would. It's very. I mean, it depends. If you have shishim against the, and by the way, nati spices. It's not. It's afilu be'elef lo bottle. Remember, it's one of those things.
So we have a problem. So we have a problem here because if you believe that it evokes the tam nifgam, it cancels the tam nifgam.
It's only a problem like this. If you fried up onions in a meat frying pan, you can't use those onions with dairy. That's the only problem you have. It transferred. Remember, normally Neno Ben Yomo will not transfer the blia. Here we're saying even if it's Neno Ben Yomo frying pan, it will transfer the blia. So you just can't cook those onions with dairy.
Ernie, where do we learn that?
Wait. Nati, you understand what we said?
Yeah, I got it.
That's it. Walter, what was your question?
No, I just don't understand where we learn out that this is more harif than bottle bashishik. In other words, where
no. When we talk,
I understand, but the spices are
that's a sugya, Walter. A sugyan taruvis is going to give us certain exceptions to the case of bittul. Normally we have nullification 60-1, but we're going to see beria. If it's a creature, afilu be'elef lo bottle. That's why if an ant or an insect falls into a chul, we have a problem because of beria, because afilu be'elef lo bottle. Or you have a roy lihiskabe. You have a piece of meat that's a really shena piece of meat. Afilu be'elef lo bottle. We're going to see certain spices, there's no nullification because it has so much flavor, there's no nullification of it. So it has nothing to do with our sugya here. But he was asking, but the issue here is, the point that we learned tonight is that even though normally if you cook something milachik in an Eno Ben Yomo pot, it doesn't cause a problem. Now we learned that if you cook a davar charif in an Eno Ben Yomo pot, it causes the transfer of transfers. That's all that happens. It's not treif. But that the onions now become meat, and you can't use those onions with something else. Now, with regard to Sfardim, one would think that since the Shulchan Aruch appears to rules in favor of the first opinion, davar charif would remain parit. However, a number of Sephardic achronim, such as the Kaf HaChaim, rule in accordance with the second more stringent opinion, except for cases of great need. And this is the reeling of the Sefer Kashos for Sfardim. Sefer Kashos, the Sakin Shela Ben Yomu, the Hefsid Meruv, V'Shas Atchak, Amaichel Kulamaki. So for Sfardim, an Edo Ben Yomo knife, if it was a big financial loss and it was an emergency, you could use the food for any, use the milk onions for the meat onions for the milk. It wouldn't be a problem. That's for Sfardim only. On the other hand, Rav Ovadia holds that the Sfardim may always be lenient. Says Rav Ovadia Yabia Omer, Harav Chochmas Adam Kosav Sha'afal Pisha Ramos Virele Lahachmir the Davar Charif Afilu Beno Ben Yomo. Very clear, black and white, gentlemen. What we just learned that Ramos Machmir by Ben Yomo with the Davar Charif. That means if you transferred trephus, chazir, because the case of chiltis in the Gemara was a piece of tarfus that they bought from a goy. You have two things that are going lenient. Not bar not tetei. So as usual, Rav Ovadia is more lenient regarding that. According to Chochmas Sadim, Rav Ovadia, the Shulchan Aruch is lenient concerning onions cut by a meat or dairy knife. If it's Eno Ben Yomo, as is evident from the fact that the second more stringent opinion is labeled only as some say. The Shulchan Aruch only writes somewhere else in 103 that one must be stringent concerning an Eno Ben Yomo knife concerning a non-kosher one. Right? If you have a knife that had trephus absorbed into it, then an Eno Ben Yomo knife is concerned of Machaya Lishvach if you cut something a davar charif. So there's a nafkamina there between Basar B'Cholov and Shari Suri, where the consideration of not bar not does not apply since the real prohibition is involved. Remember, we learned not bar not only works because it's a hector blia. If you have an Isser Blia, there is no Naparnat. Again, goes back to learn that Ron last week. It's a critical Ron. Okay. Cooking a davar charif in a meat or dairy pot. Although in the rest of the shir we will focus mainly on the case of a davar charif cut by a knife, we should note that a davar charif, even if not cut by a dairy or meat knife, cooked in a dairy or meat pot, will also have the status of the pot, even if the pot is not ben yomo, which is what we've learned already so far. Because there you don't need the sakina, you have the heat that's transferring it. Normally we say if it's beyond 24 hours, it's ain't ben yomo, it's a live gam, we don't have to worry about it. But it's a davar charif, it's machaya lishvach. So we've learned some very important concepts tonight that are all over the place, right? Avalim haya davar charif kagon shebishlu dvarim charifim bekli shel basar. Afilu ein ben yomo. O shedachu taflin, you used a mortar and pestle. The modach shel basar and bishlu b'chalav oyster. Afilu b'di'evet. Adik shisha neged abasar balua behem. There you would need 60 against the whatever blia was in the. You have a little bit of onion that has a meat blia. So if you want to cook it with dairy, if you have shishim against the matat blia, then you could eat it. Otherwise, you would not be able to eat it. Okay, so now we're going to go back to the knife. But this, I think, we will finish next week because, we've reached the time. And any questions, any comments? Okay, I think again, we're getting, I think, a very solid foundation in all these halachas.
I mean,